Okay, so it looks about half of you would consider yourself a RAD responder, novice RAD responder user. You're at least familiar with that system. About a quarter are proficient or advanced, and about a quarter have never used it before. So we've got kind of a distribution here. I'll get into this in a little bit, but you are going to see a lot of overlap, a lot of similarities between RAD responder and ChemResponder. So if you do have some experience with RAD responder, some of this might feel a little bit redundant for you, so bear with me there. But we'll kind of, I'll be keeping this in mind as we go forward. Okay, great. And I'm going to put up one more poll question here, if you'd be so kind as to answer this one. The question is just, how do you hope to use ChemResponder? Maybe you really kind of haven't answered this right now. There's some ideas that are percolating, but a few options there. We intend to use it for monitoring, facility inspections, emergency response, other, or not sure, and you can select more than one if you want. Okay, so it looks like most folks would be looking at using it for emergency response, but also about a third are saying that they might use it for monitoring, facility inspections, other, and about 15% say not sure. So that's great. I think there are a lot of kind of diverse applications for the system. Given its different capabilities, you're really just limited by your imagination here. So excellent. So that's good context. We'll dive in. I'm just going to give a little bit of background, and then I'll go to a live demo of the actual site. But ChemResponder is a free whole community system for the collection, management, and sharing of chemical incident preparedness information. So that's a mouthful, but a big piece that we want to hit there is that it is a free system. So there's no charge for the users that are signing on. So be you a state or local organization or another federal entity, the free application that you're able to use however you please. Is for government agencies primarily, and it's accessible via the web, tablets, smartphones. The mobile application is available for you on Android, Windows, and iOS. And another thing we always note is that this is an evolving system. We make enhancements based on feedback that we're getting from users. So that's a theme that you'll periodically hear us return to. Actually, one second, I apologize. That poll question's still up. I'm trying to show slides. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. So again, this is an evolving system. We make enhancements based on feedback that we get from users, and we want to make it, we want to provide as much utility to this community as we can, and a lot of that is contingent on what you're telling us is useful and not useful. So feel free to continue to send us feedback. Let us know what's working for you. Let us know what you want to see. We take that into consideration as we're prioritizing our development. So I mentioned before that, again, if you are a RAD responder user, you're going to see a lot of similarities here between RAD and Chem. They essentially comprise a single system with the same architecture. They have the same design and user interface. So as you navigate around the site, if you have that coming in, that'll be useful for you. If you're not a pre-existing user of RAD responder, no worries. Again, we're going to spin you up today. If your organization has both Chem and RAD enabled, you're going to be able to access your RAD events and data and information in Chem and vice versa. So just so folks are not confused by that, you are going to kind of have the full breadth of what ChemResponder offers within RAD responder. So this affords you kind of that true common operating picture across all those different hazard types, which again, we'll see that today. So in terms of actually getting a ChemResponder account, just a couple quick words about this. If you already have a RAD responder account, you need to be part of an organization that has Chem enabled. So we enable ChemResponder access at the organization level, not at the individual account level. And so that's also an important point. So when ChemResponder is enabled for a RAD responder org that already exists, those roles and permissions that you have assigned in RAD responder are going to apply equally in ChemResponder. So an administrator who is an administrator for RAD responder is also going to be an administrator on the chemical side. Just something to keep in mind. We can have some discussion about this, I think, afterwards. Some organizations have indicated that they'd rather kind of keep those compartmentalized. So they've looked at just creating a separate organization for ChemResponder outside of their RAD responder organization. So something to keep in the back of your mind. And your same RAD responder username and password, you'll also be able to use that for ChemResponder if you don't have separate credentials. If you want a separate ChemResponder org, just let us know. We can create that for you. It's a very quick and easy process. So just send us an email. If you don't have a RAD or Chem account, I'll show you how you can request one. Again, it's a very simple process, so we'll look at that in a moment. Just a quick word about roles and permissions. So as I go through some things on the site today, I basically have site administrator access, which gives me sort of this God's eye view of the system. I have the full breadth of capabilities and permissions across the site. Depending on the role that you have within your organization, you might not see all the things that I'm seeing. So for example, if you're just a data collector and data viewer in your organization, you won't be able to manage or add or create partnerships or equipment and that sort of thing. So don't let that throw you as we go forward. If you do think you need a different set of permissions or a different role for your org, you can reach out to your organization's administrator. You can reach out to us as well, obviously. We can talk about that. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick pause, see if there are any questions, and then we're going to transition to the website and do a demo. Hey, Mike, I see you've got your hand raised. If you unmute yourself, you'll be able to talk so we can hear you. Yeah. Mike, I think you're going to need to call in if you haven't already. And that way you'll be able to ask a question. You can also just enter that right into the question box if you have your screen open, and we can answer it there for you. Okay, I'm going to plunge ahead. We don't have a ton of time, and again, there's a lot to cover. So this is the ChemResponder site. And so this is a web-based platform. You go to www.chemresponder.net. That's where you can access it. On the homepage here, we kind of keep a list of different technical enhancements we've done lately, things that are coming up. You'll see our Twitter feed here. We keep people spun up on the latest news and events. Again, I mentioned those upcoming webinars that we have. We're going to be doing these on a monthly basis. So if you want to attend another one, or if you have colleagues who are interested, they can come here and get signed up for those. And again, we do have more focused, for example, mobile app webinar sessions on a monthly basis too, if you want to spend more time looking at that. If you don't have an account yet, you're going to see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a request an account button. You can click that. You'll be presented with some user agreement terms. An important line we like to highlight from this text here. I know usually these aren't things that folks spend a ton of time reading, but it's important to note that any information that you upload into ChemResponder is owned by the collecting organization. So that means, you know, your whatever your organization is, wherever you're coming from, any information that you put in here, from your equipment types to the data points that you upload, that's owned by you. No federal entity, be it FEMA or anybody else or anything like that, is able to access your information, to edit it. And so that's something to keep in mind is, again, that information is yours when you upload it here. So it's a pretty basic form that you fill out. Again, if you already have a RAD responder account, this isn't something you need to do. You don't need a new account. We just need to enable your organization to have ChemResponder access. So again, if you already have an account, you're going to see your sign in button in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and get in. So after you sign in, you'll notice just a couple changes. I've got my active emergency events banner up here. So if there are active emergency events, and we'll talk about events in a minute, but this is designed as to provide the community rapid access to that event if there are a variety of organizations that need to see that information. So we see that here. You're also going to notice that there are a couple things that have changed in my banner up here. So I'm going to be using this top ribbon bar to be navigating around the site quite a bit as we go forward. We'll primarily spend our time in the organization space where I am right now, and then the event space, which we'll get to in a moment. But this is the organization space. And so again, if you are a RAD responder user, there's a lot you're seeing here that's familiar. So the elements that have been cornerstone capabilities of RAD responder since its inception were carried directly over into ChemResponder. So that's going to include things like partnerships. So my organization menu here is where I'm going to manage that data sharing that we're able to do. So the list of partnerships for my organization is here. I can request new ones here. You have control over what type of information you're sharing with your partners. So when you create events, be they routine emergency response or exercises, I can choose whether or not I'm sharing that with my partners. I can share other things besides events, things like facilities, equipment. We can also share data feeds. I'm also going to use this to manage my personnel. So we talked earlier about how different users are going to have a different set of roles, which is going to give them a different set of permissions. So if you don't want every user to be able to create events or to edit those partnerships that we just looked at, you can manage their permissions here. I'll just quickly note that this may look a little bit different. Again, for those of you who are longtime RAD responder users, we've made a change here where now we have default event roles. So this is for the purpose of just making it clear what types of permissions that a user has when an event is created. So now we can see that we can assign things like the team manager role as a default event role. So when my organization creates an event, I know that this person is going to, by default, be a team manager on any of those events that we're creating. We can also manage equipment. So it's important that any data point that's created in ChemResponder can be associated with the equipment that was used to get it. So when we talk about the QA/QC process, validating data, assessing it, that's a capability that exists here. We can approve or reject data points. But the ability to track the equipment that was used to take that gas meter reading or to get that chemical identification, we can associate any of those data points with that equipment. We can go in and see, was this equipment properly calibrated? When did it last get maintenance? All that sort of information that's important for assessing that information, for assessing that data. ChemResponder allows us to track that. This is also, it's essentially just a database of all of your different equipment. So I think we've heard a lot of organizations that have really appreciated the fact that this is a free system. They examine other options that come at a cost. These kind of built out custom systems that are a step above just passing around an Excel sheet, say. But this is free, so you can add new equipment here. I've got an Add Equipment button. I can create a new individual record, enter some basic metadata, manufacturer, model, serial, etc. Depending on the type of equipment I have, say it's a gas meter, it's going to open up new options for me here that pertain to that specific equipment type. So I can create individual equipment records that way. We've also got a bulk upload option. So if you want to, enter 20 different instruments at once, and you don't want to go through the tedium of having to enter those individually, there's a spreadsheet option here as well, where you can enter that into an Excel, which makes it a little bit faster. We also have a facilities management capability here. So this has been kind of interesting for us as we've been exploring some of the new features that we've been developing in ChemResponder. We're certainly noting that facility management is going to kind of play a bigger role in the chem incident world than it frankly does on the RAD side. At least that's been our experience. So ChemResponder, just like RAD, allows you to add facilities. We can display these on our event maps for geospatial awareness and all that sort of thing. So when we add a facility in Chem, I can come in here and name it. I can choose a type. So if I have a chemical storage facility, where is it? Storage. Why am I not seeing chemical? But I can come in here, add this information, add points of contact. Once I create that record, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong org. Give me 1 second, folks. There we go. So once I create a chemical storage facility type, I can indicate if this is a Tier 2 facility. So if you're familiar with EPCRA and the Tier 2 reporting requirements that come with that, we've basically taken a lot of the forms, or the fields rather, that come from Tier 2 reporting forms, and we put them in ChemResponder. So these are all fields that ID numbers and information that Tier 2 reporting form is asking for. So I can report all that and track that within ChemResponder. Again, I can put in points of contact in here, that sort of thing. Once I've created that facility, and I'm back here just at my facilities list, I can go in and view its details by clicking on my little magnifying glass. And there's additional information I'm able to enter now. So I can enter the specific chemicals that are stored here. So in this case, I've got this oil mist, this herbicide, I've got ammonia. I can add additional chemicals. So we've just got a chemical list. Maybe, I've got a hydrogen sulfide. I can indicate if this is an extremely hazardous substance. Again, these are all fields that we've taken from that Tier 2 form from EPA, and we've implemented them here. Okay.
Sean, we got a question from Mike regarding facilities. Mike asked, on the facility page, is there any interface with ePlan or Cameo? And I would offer that while we don't have a direct integration yet, those are going to be in our next steps. So as we develop the basic architecture, Mike, we want to make sure we're capturing the right fields, and then we're going to start pursuing these integrations. So we've been talking to EPA, talking to others about potential integrations, about existing systems, capabilities like Cameo, like ePlan, like others, where we can make that integration seamless. So you don't have to enter information in a duplicative manner. So if these integrations are something that are desired by you and others, please let us know, because that helps drive our demand signal so that we can push those integrations to the higher up on the list of enhancements. Mike also had a question about equipment. Wanted to know if under the equipment page, can the status column be modified?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'll return to that real quick, Mike. So again, you'll know I'm just using the side menu over here to navigate around these different menus. But yeah, so you're asking about these different columns, be they status or next maintenance, etc. So these are all equipment records that I've already created. So again, I'm just clicking on my magnifying glass to view details. I can come in here and I can click edit, and that's going to allow me to change any of this information. Everything down to the serial number if I need to modify that for whatever reason. But I can come in here, change this to ready to not ready, etc. These different status fields are available for you. So there's that option. I can do that individually. Let's say you get a whole bunch of equipment back from maintenance at one time, and it's tedious, obviously, to have to go through these individually and edit them. I can come in here into this import equipment field, or click on this import equipment button, and I can, for the sake of time, I'm not going to kind of belabor this too much, but I can download my organization's equipment, and that's going to allow me to see all of the equipment records in one Excel sheet here. And I'll just pull it up here real fast. Then you can go through and edit multiple fields at once, and then indicate that this is, an edited record, and then you re-upload that sheet, and it'll change all those different, it'll change information for all those instruments at once. So that makes that process a little bit easier for you.
And Mike, just based on your follow-up comment, the status column does not represent a deployed status, so it won't tell you if it's deployed to a particular location. However, the reason that we want your equipment in a ready status is that if your equipment is not in a ready status, it will not be able to be used by technicians, field teams when they're entering data and want to associate that data with a discrete piece of equipment. So in order for a technician to be able to enter data, associate with a particular piece of equipment, it must be in that ready status. And that way, the data, the raw value, the units of measure, the equipment all get commingled, so we can associate the equipment with the data for a particular event. Hope that makes sense.
We had another question from looks like Charles and Jesse about facilities, and so they asked about the ability to bulk upload facilities, similar like we do for equipment right now. So I guess a couple answers to that question. One is in terms of a capability like we have again on the equipment side that I just showed. That does not exist yet for facilities, but it's something that we're looking at because we know, some of these jurisdictions have, a ton of facilities. The state of California, I think, has over 140,000 different facilities that, fall under these Tier 2 reporting requirements. So we're looking at some different options there because we know that this is a capability gap that exists currently. But we're looking at, some way for bulk uploading by user, be it through an Excel sheet. Like Brendan was saying earlier as well, we're looking at other potential integrations that we could do with different databases. Say if there's a state level database that's maintaining facility information. From a technical standpoint, it's certainly feasible that we can create some sort of integration through an API or the like to kind of automatically pull that information down into ChemResponder, operationalize that for folks who need that information.
Yeah, one thing we might be able to do in the near term, which is slightly easier, is Sean talked about doing a bulk update utility, so for facilities. So if you're managing all your facilities in Cameo, can you export the information in Cameo, and can we easily consume it via a bulk upload so that you don't have to get into hand jamming that data twice in two different systems, which obviously would be a waste of your time.
Excellent. Okay, great questions. I'm going to keep this moving on to Sitreps. So in gathering our initial requirements for ChemResponder, some of the feedback we got was there's a difference between the radiological nuclear response side of things and the hazmat side, where on the hazmat side of the house, fire departments, for example, are having these types of calls with much greater regularity, say, than they are on the RAD side. And not all of those calls, none of those responses are going to require kind of a full-fledged event like we would create in RAD Responder in typical fashion. But, we still want some way to capture the information from that call, what occurred, kind of what was the summary of the response actions that were taken. And so the idea of these Sitreps was kind of born out of that observation. And so this is a data type similar to, like what you'd see in RAD Responder, like a survey, a sample, a spectra. But this is unique to ChemResponder now because we can create Sitreps outside of an event context. Okay, so I have an actual menu within my organization space. Again, this is outside of an event where I can create a Sitrep. I've got my little green button here. And we have the typical metadata, when did it occur, where, and we'll get into the mobile app later, but this is something I can do within the mobile app as well from the field, but I can do it from the website here too. We've got a sharing mode, so I can choose to share with my partners, just my organization. I could choose to share with the entire network if I wanted to. Environmental conditions, what was the temperature, humidity, what was the wind doing, what were the chemicals we identified, what was the medical impact to the public, a narrative, any attachments that I want to upload. So attachments can include anything from a PowerPoint to Word doc, to video, to pictures. Anything I'd want to include there, I can do that. So none of these fields are required. You can kind of make it your own. You're filling out what you need to, what's pertinent, obviously. There are just a handful of fields here that are required. But again, the idea here is that we're giving sort of a quick way to capture some key information from the variety of responses that are taking place. Sometimes in dozens of instances in a given month that some of these organizations are having to handle. So that's a bit about Sitreps, and obviously, this menu allows me to see all of them, to view them. We've got our different filtering options here. If I want to know, how many responses do we have, with that involving ammonia, in the past month. This allows me kind of a quick and easy way to display that. Okay, so those filtering options really come in handy here. This is all kind of getting towards the theme. What we're hoping to kind of build out in ChemResponder is a way for organizations to just really kind of easily, capture the overall picture of response patterns, maybe giving them the ability to conduct some analysis, identify some patterns or trends that are occurring in the types of calls they're making, where they're making them. So that's part of the direction we're hoping to take here. We've also got a capability in ChemResponder called Lessons Learned. So this is something that is not on the RAD responder side, but this is born out of some feedback that we're getting from Chemical Safety Board in particular. Again, because a lot of these calls, on the chemical side are taking place much more often, we can really glean some lessons learned, some takeaways from those different responses that organizations want to be able to capture and to organize, to store for the sake of posterity. So again, I can create lesson learned pretty easily. Again, you've got all this metadata. We can indicate where it took place and when. We can name it. We have, again, these sharing modes are available to us. So if I want to share it with my partners or just within my organization or with the entire network, that's there for me. Type of response that we were talking about, maybe it's a transportation incident. We can indicate if this is for testing or training or an actual emergency response. Any events that we created that were related to this lesson learned, we can add them here. Again, we can add chemicals that were involved in the incident. Any Sitreps we created, we can add those as well. And again, any of those attachments that we want to include. So if there are PowerPoints and such that you use for briefings, we want to store them here. Any other sort of emergency response plans that are relevant, we can attach them to this lesson learned. So again, this is kind of a new capability that we're excited about on the chem side. So that's going to bring me to the hazmat incident database, which I'll talk to, and then we'll get into events. So the hazmat incident database, there's a link that's available in your lessons learned here. And I can also come to my resources tab, and I can see it under my tools. So the hazmat incident database is just kind of a way for us to view different events, lessons learned, Sitreps, either from my own organization, with my partners, or from the entire network writ large. Okay, so I just clicked on Show Advanced there, kind of in this top ribbon bar, and it opens up this interface where I'm able to, I have a basic search bar where I can put any text, and then I can choose to search by events, lessons learned, or Sitreps. And so, for example, maybe we're interested in ammonia response. And so I want to search events, lessons learned, and Sitreps from across the entire network where somebody, recorded that they had an ammonia response. So I have this one Sitrep here. Again, right now there's not a ton of data here because it's just getting off the ground, but in due time, obviously, the idea is that we're able to, quickly filter through the different types of information that people are putting in here so that the network can benefit from that. So that we can look at and share lessons learned with one another. So we can talk about some of the takeaways that we had from these different response types. So hazmat incident database is there for you to kind of share some of that information with one another, with your partners, and with the whole network. Okay, we're just going to take a quick pause again. I know there were some other questions that were put into the box there. We're going to get to some of those. So, Charles, you asked a question, if a sitrep is in an event, does it autofill with details from the event? That's a good question. We're going to get into events here in a second to give folks some context. But so if I created a sitrep within an event, sitrep is a data type that's available to me within the event. So actually, this would just make more sense if I show it to you. So I'm in an event now, and you can see that one of the data types I have is a sitrep. So from that sense, yeah, I can go in, I can view all the sitreps that were created within the bounds of this event, right? And so once these load up here, they'll display in the table format. They'll also display geospatially on my map view for this event. So you have that asset for you too. Some of the information that you're talking about, some of these fields. So some of this is going to auto-populate. I don't think the location doesn't auto-populate, for instance. So that's left to the user to fill out. But yeah, I hope that answers your question there. Anything else right now? Otherwise, I want to get a move on. So push through. All right. So we're going to go to the event space. Again, you'll note that I was using my top ribbon bar here to just click over to my event space here. Right now, my event is called ADY Chem Prod event. If I click my little down arrow, again, this is the exact same interface as RAD Responder for those of you that are familiar there, but I can search for events or create events. So if I want to create an event here, I get this form. I provide some of the required fields. I name it. So now we're going to see that, I have the option to select a hazard type. If my organization that I was using here had access to both Chem and RAD, right now I'm in a Chem only org, but I would be able to select one hazard type or both. So if I wanted to create a RAD and Chem event, I would have access to all those data types. So survey samples, those RAD specific data types on top of chemical IDs and gas meters. Okay. So I can create my chemical event. I can choose a type. Note that if I select emergency response, that's going to push the event to that home screen that we saw earlier. It'll show up in that banner as an active emergency response event. So typically, if I'm just testing and training, just messing around with some things, I'm going to select that as my event type. We've got our sharing mode, so I can choose to share with partners, my organization. I can choose to keep it private. I'm not going to go through too many of these fields in detail. If you have specific questions here, you can certainly follow up after. For the sake of time, I'm going to push through a little bit. But I'm able to select my location using one of those modes. So that's creating an event. It's a very simple, easy process. As soon as I click save on there, my event is up and running. I'm going to go to an existing event just for the sake of demonstration. Okay. So some of the fields that we looked at, obviously in the organization space, apply here as well. So we see that we have our partners. I can manage these partners at the event level. So I can create events that I choose to share by default with my organization's partners, in which case they're automatically added to that event. But I can manage these at the event level too. So if there are additional organizations I want to add on top of my standing partners, or there are organizations that are my partners, but I realize I need to take them off the event. It's pretty simple for me to organize that information here. Okay. Same with responders. So I can add, if I don't want to add an entire organization to an event, but there are specific personnel from that org that I do want to add, I can do that as well. I can change event roles here, with just these little click boxes. Somebody's typically a data collector, but I realize they need to be a team manager that day. Any of that we're able to handle here. I can add my facilities. So again, we know this has more relevance in the chem side than the RAD, and I'm able to add my different facilities to this event space. So we'll go into the map view. And again, those of you that are familiar with RAD Responder, you're going to see a lot of the same capabilities, all the same capabilities rather, that exist already in RAD Responder have been carried over into the ChemResponder map. So we have a really powerful set of tools here. We won't be able to hit on all of them today. We just want to kind of kickstart you so you can start exploring on your own. But a few things I'll point out. You're going to note that we have different data types, obviously, on the chem side than we do on the RAD. So we've talked about Sitreps. And again, you can create these Sitreps within an event. And they're associated automatically within that event on top of creating them, within outside of an event context for your organization. We have gas meter readings. So when I create one of these, I'm able to, again, we have our usual metadata. I can select the chemicals that were identified with this meter. So in this case, thinking back to when we uploaded our equipment, I can choose to indicate on that equipment record that this meter only detects these specific chemicals. So in this instance, I've said, all right, this meter does carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and oxygen. I want to add these three. So basically, this list is pre-filtered to just the chemicals that this meter can read, just the sensors that it has. So I have those chemicals. I can add my concentrations. 50 parts per million. I'm just making up some jump data here. And maybe I've got 20% oxygen. Okay. So I can create those gas meter readings. We have a colorimetric data type. So if you're in the field, using pH paper, M8 paper, we're able to record that data type as well. So you have this here for you, different paper types. Now I will say we have a little bit of work to do, as I'm sure a lot of you have used draggers before. So we're on the verge right now of incorporating that as well. So I know a lot of orgs are using the dragger tubes. So that's coming shortly. Okay. Couple of the things I'll point out on the map. So, we've got all of our typical symbology. So here's my gas meter reading that I just created. So, the data, who created it, the chemicals that were identified, all that's displayed for me in my map here. I'm going to show my facilities layer. Facility. Okay, but so we're able to, I think earlier, Brendan again was talking about different integrations that we're looking to do. So one thing I want to point out here too is that, this is a GIS file that I uploaded as a model that I created in the LOHA. So any GIS files that you're creating in a separate system, like a LOHA where it's outputting some sort of GIS, again, just like RAD Responder, you're able to upload those things here and display them. So you can still leverage some of these other assets you might be using already and display it in ChemResponder. We also have a new capability, relatively new, for assignments. And so these are different assignments that I've created. You can assign them to a specific person or to a field team. And it tells them where they need to go and collect data, gives them a set of instructions, and they're able to indicate on that assignment when it's been completed. So I've got my little dotted lines when it's still incomplete, my dark green one when it's finished. Okay, I've got my usual drawing tools. We can display exclusion zones and that sort of thing. We can drop points to display where roadblocks are. Okay. Give me just 1 second to check in on the questions here, and I'll come back in just a moment. So we had a question about papers, the different colorimetric methods. So if you're seeing papers that aren't displayed under that colorimetric list right now. So right now I've got things like M8, M9, M256, pH paper. So if there are other ones that you're not seeing there right now, that's certainly something we can include. So if there's something on the list that you're not seeing, shoot it over to us. It's very easy for us to add things to that list. You still could, create an equipment record for that paper, and indicate it'll show up in your equipment list when you're collecting data. So yeah, if there's a specific paper type, you can just create an equipment record for that, and you'll have access to it that way. Okay, I'm just going to jump over to mobile real quick. Sorry, I was just checking there's something else on the site there. I know we're running up against our hours, so I do want to give a little time to mobile. So I'm going to pull up basically what's our Windows desktop version of the mobile application. Again, the mobile app is available on Android and iOS. This is the Windows version. So you can download that mobile application. You're going to use your same credentials that you use to log into the website to get into the mobile app. The first thing that you'll see is a list of events that are active and that you have access to. And so the event that I was just in on the site, this 80Y Chem Prod event, that's what I'm seeing here first on my list. Actually, before I go into that specific event, there's a couple things I want to point out that are unique to ChemResponder relative to RAD Responder. So the first one is that I can create events and Sitreps from mobile. So creating events in particular is something that you can't do on the RAD Responder mobile application, but you can on Chem. So I can create an event on the fly from mobile. Again, this is partly in response to, or largely in response rather, to the fact that we had a lot of responders who were saying that we're doing these calls often. Oftentimes it just might be on the fly, and so they'd like that ability to be able to, again, just create these kind of on the fly with their phone or with their tablet while they're in the field. So we can create that from the mobile. We can create Sitreps outside of an event context here on mobile as well as on the site. There is also an event map outside of an event context in ChemResponder. So for the sake of situational awareness and being able to kind of see information and data irrespective of any particular event, we made a map available outside of the event. So on this map, I'm able to see things like my facilities. I can see my other responders that are in the field. So we have a responder tracking option that allows you to see where other field teams are. And so it's tracking the device's location through the mobile app. You can display that on this map. I can see Sitreps, I can see partners. So kind of a handy situational awareness tool that we're implementing here. So I'll jump over into an event. Again, this is the one that I was in before on the site. I can see my different tiles that come up here. I can create any of these data types that we've already discussed, my gas meter reading, my Sitreps, my color metric, or just my observations. So I can create my gas meter reading, select my equipment, identify particular chemicals, it's asking me if I want to sync. I'm not going to bother now. My usual metadata that I'm able to report here, when it was taken, where. We have different location options. So I can use my current location. I can choose to enter a lat long, enter an address. I can just select it from my map, or if I'm using sampling locations, I have that option too. So down here on the lower bar, you'll see that I have a couple things. One is this accuracy meter. So if I'm using that current location mode, it's just, taking my GPS's or my device's GPS location to record my location for this data point. This accuracy meter is telling me, how accurately it's detecting me. So right now, in other words, my location is accurate to within 55 meters. All right. So in addition, I'm able to see if my tracking is turned on or off. So again, there's a responder tracking feature that we offer. Tracking has to be enabled on the event itself, and then the responder, the actual user, has control over whether or not they're choosing to enable tracking on their own device. So by clicking this little gear, I can choose to disable it. So now it's showing me, okay, my tracking's off. They can't see me on that event map. I can turn it back on just as easily there. Okay. And we have these other data types, obviously a chemical ID, if I'm using a photoionization detector, some other detecting capacity to get some readings. We've had some conversations about also getting spectra files in here. If you're using some sort of reach back support, you're sending that spectra file somewhere else for further analysis, and using ChemResponder is kind of a repository for that. So we're exploring some potential there. It's something that we already do in RAD responder that we think we're going to be able to do in Chem as well. And then, of course, I've got my event map within, again, this is within the event context. So I have one available to me outside of events. I have an event-specific one here too. So this is going to show me all the data that's been recorded for this event. I can see, other chemical IDs, other gas meter readings that have been created. This is showing me my location here. I can click on them. I can see details, the chemical that was identified, who recorded it. So again, these are all just kind of different data points that have already been recorded. So a really handy situational awareness tool. Okay, we'll take a quick pause right there, see if there are any other questions that have come up, and then we'll start to wind down.
Hi, everyone. This is Brendan Palmer. We're just going through the questions, trying to make sure that we've addressed them. As Sean mentioned, we're coming up against the hour. We're happy to stay on to talk to folks, to show some additional functionality. If you want to stay on, we've got plenty of time. I did want to mention that, as Sean indicated earlier, this is a FEMA CBRN office capability. FEMA is currently furloughed as a result of the partial government shutdown, so wanted to make sure that we're passing on the message that they want us to share to our users, and that is ChemResponder obviously is a new capability, much like RAD responder in its infancy. it is intended to grow and evolve so that it becomes truly operational capacity. The nice thing about ChemResponder now is that we're leveraging the existing architecture, the capabilities, the best practices and lessons learned that we've evolved from RAD Responder over the past 5 years. We've got a little ways to go with ChemResponder. We're going to be focusing on initially getting the data effective for hazmat technicians, for data collectors, to make sure we're comprehensive in our data capture. We also want to work with the facilities aspect so that you can manage facilities and do so in an integrated and interoperable manner so it's not duplicative. So these integrations are a key priority for this fiscal year and the next. Lastly, we want to enlist your help and support. So obviously, we got a lot of good feedback on this webinar about things that we can do to enhance. We want to keep that coming. So stay engaged with us. Let us know what we can do to make this system useful for you and your organization. Because just like with RAD Responder, this capability, the system is yours. So we want to make sure that it is effective. And this is the mantra that FEMA CBRN office is preaching, that they want to build capabilities, standard capabilities for federal, state, local, territorial, and tribal organizations. So we appreciate your time. If anyone has any questions, please fire them now. You can do so verbally or text them into the questions prompt. We're going to stick around for a little bit, so feel free to ask any questions, make any comments, or provide us any input. We had a question from John Stevenson about the relationship between the mobile app and the desktop and the ability to share and consume real-time information. So for everyone on the line, the mobile applications are very utilitarian. They are meant to collect and transmit data effectively. The desktop application is more robust. Obviously, better GIS capabilities. You're managing your organization, your equipment, your events in that desktop app. So the way it generally works is an event is created and personnel are dispatched to collect data using the mobile application. From the desktop application on the map, you'll be able to see your responders, where they are, where they've been, and the data they're collecting in real time. So the mobile app will collect data. It will transmit data so long as it has a connection. If there is a lack of cellular or Wi-Fi connectivity, the data will be cached locally on the phone and then transmitted as soon as there is a connection. It's timestamped for when that record is saved, so the date and location, assuming you still have a GPS location, will be transmitted as of the time it was saved, not when it was transmitted. So if you're viewing it on the web application, you should be able to see all that data coming in real time. So that's the dynamic between the mobile application and the desktop. You can do some things on the mobile application. There is a mobile map for events and for your organization on the ChemResponder app, where you can filter information, where you can see other responders, see other data that's been collected, see facilities, etc. It's not as robust as the web app, but because of the demand from the community, we've increased the things that you can do on that mobile mapping feature. Hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to ask any follow-ups. All right, does everyone have any more questions or comments or input? All right. Well, we'll hang out for another minute or two in case there's any questions. Again, this is not your only forum to engage with us. We have the ChemResponder support email. Do we have that on the PowerPoint?
Yep. Let me pull it up real quick for you just to show it one more time. I'm also going to kick out an email to everyone after we wrap up today with just some feedback, some questions, a couple questions for you to take you less than 1 minute. And we'll also supply this information there too about how you can reach us. But support@chemresponder.net is the best way to reach the team. It goes to all our support staff, including our developers. And we'll get back to you right away.
All right, and we might follow up individually. We kind of pull together focus groups just to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. We have a steering board with multiple federal, state, and local organizations that are helping us, but we want to make sure that our network is giving us the information that we need to make sure the system works for you. So again, appreciate everyone's time. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or input, and enjoy the rest of your day.